Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Lots of people have that type of grass. It looks great in the summer. I'm surprised the OP's neighbor's so worried. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. HOA approved lawn that can spread. 2 years ago, we removed our dead fescue lawn and replaced it with Zenith zoysia. Both grasses are allowed per the neighborhood HOA. Last year, our neighbor, who we're friendly with and our kids play together frequently, requested that I straighten out the property line because he didn't like that the zoysia goes dormant and turns brown during the winter months. I did as requested. Nothing else was said about it until about a month ago. He put hundreds of dollars worth of rocks on the same property line I'd straightened out. He said he thought it would stop my grass from spreading into his lawn. Last week, he texted requesting I meet him outside. He told me my grass was spreading into his lawn and wanted to know what I would do about it. I told him that the HOA allows for my grass and I didn't think it was spreading, that a lot of the brown he was seeing was due to the kids playing outside in the brown zoysia, which is still partially dormant. He was just coming off the lawn. Basically, it sheds when you're running all over it the way we have been. He had also been dealing with infestations of Bermuda grass, which, like zoysia, goes dormant and turns brown in the winter. I offered to let him mix up some of my herbicide, which is helping me deal with Bermuda in my lawn, and he didn't accept. Post our meeting, he appears to have sprayed some type of herbicide that's wiped out his fescue beyond where the rocks are. During the end of our discussion, I told him we could install in-ground edging if that's what he wanted to do, meaning I would help him put it in. Although today he texted stating he believed I would be the one to pay for it and, I believe he thinks also, put it in after asking me when I was going to do so. He doesn't believe he should have to pay for the edging. My wife and I feel similarly. Since I said that, he's told me all via text that putting in a grass that spreads was not very neighborly. I told him I was sorry he felt that way and reiterated that the HOA allows for my type of grass, that I had fixed the property line with my own time and effort, even though it hadn't mattered to me, that the rocks he put in were done so without discussing with me, but that was fine since it was his property, and that the grass that died was not a result of anything I or the zoysia did, and I didn't think the conversation was one that had to be had over a text message. There was some more back and forth, but it exceeds the character limit to include it. But the last thing he has texted was, I just reread your text, I put rocks in without discussing. You have a lot of nerve. You never discussed this grass with me at all. You just put it in. At this point, I feel like our neighbor has abandoned all sense of pleasantness, but neither of us are probably going anywhere for the next decade. We're going to have a wonderful time with our neighbors. And our second story. You need details of every food on sale at my festival? Okay, enjoy missing your flight. I used to plan events in this very small city in a province that's more or less stuck back in time. My name doesn't sound English, and I always ran into difficulties with paper pushers who were not so subtle racists. After years of dealing with government permits and all kinds of bureaucrats, I learned that making friends with the higher-ups made things run smoother. Enter Rude Lady, RL. RL was new to the government's department I had to get food licenses from. I needed her to go over some documents and approve them so that they could send an inspector on site to ensure that my food vendors were complying with food regulations. This was always fairly straightforward. I submitted the documents with the vendor's information to get an approval to set up a time for the inspector to make sure the food vendor's set up properly. I set up a meeting with her to ensure I'm aware of any new policies they may be rolling out between me applying and my event. Back then, I had been made aware that there would be some changes to policy in between the time I submitted the forms and the time my event happened. I always submitted my government forms several months ahead to ensure nothing came back to me with changes last minute. Our province was still figuring out how to deal with mobile food vendors back then, and things would change as the year went on. This is why I'd made friends with the department's director, DD. DD was chill. He was a man in his 50s that was super excited that the province would finally get some festivals featuring international food. We'd met at one of our prior events. As a matter of fact, DD had given me the heads up about the changes and gave me a heads up about RL's attitude. He offered me his contact info and told me to let him know when my applications were submitted. At my meeting with RL, I greeted her warmly and tried to shake her hand, but she dismissed it. I chalked it up to a normal bureaucrat unpleasantness. She's this big middle-aged woman with a get-me-the-manager air all around her. She scanned the documents with a face that's both confused and disgusted. She asks me why there weren't any local traditional food vendors on site. She offered that the festival would be better if you served traditional local foods. I explained that none applied this year. She continues to criticize the vendor selection for some time. She questions the feasibility of some of the foods. She even outright says that she thinks one particular vendor isn't going to be too popular because people around here do not like spicy food, and I should give that spot to a local. That's never mind the fact that everyone in my event is a local business owner. I get she's going to make this more difficult than it needs to be. A meeting that would have been less than 30 minutes turns into an hour-and-a-half inquiry about the vendor selection process and other details that have nothing to do with her job. On my way to the office, I fire an email to her and CC DD with a copy of all the documents, just so that she has an electronic copy. DD acknowledges the email and says he's looking forward to this year's festival. RL doesn't reply. Fast forward a few months, one of my vendors also runs another food festival, and she calls me up. She asks me if RL asked me to submit a list of all the menus the vendors will be providing. My friend almost had to cancel her event because RL refused to send the inspector without the menu information. I email RL and DD and try to get more information. DD says there's no such policy. RL doesn't reply. I've been burnt by such surprises before, and I know a petty bureaucrat when I see one. I got the feeling that she was going to request menu information from my festival and make me rush to get that info just before the event. I prepared ahead of time and got all my information in order. As luck may have it, DD was at my friend's food festival. We got to talking. I told him about what my friend had gone through. He didn't seem surprised. He told me he'd look into things, but if RL decided to pull something similar off, I'd have to let him know. Flash forward to 2 weeks prior to my event. I need approval for my food vendors by that Friday, and it's Wednesday, and I've heard nothing. I'd emailed and called the week prior, and RL told me twice that I'd have my approval by the end of the week. I chose not to wait and drove over to the office. When I get there, the front desk lady tells me that I have a package and that it was there since the Friday of the week before. I figure it's my approval, and I'm glad that I won't have to deal with RL's bullcrap. When the clerk hands me the package, I know what's up. She hands me a paper envelope containing what must have been a Stephen King book. RL had taken the trouble of printing the regulations for food vendors and put it in the package straight from the government website. You can find those regulations online, and I was very well versed in them. It was a not-so-subtle insult. She also added a document with changes that needed to be submitted before approval. The package also contained a notice that I must make the changes to the application by Friday. I'm fuming. I spent the rest of the day reading through the changes. By the end of it, none of the changes she added brought me into complying with regulations. Most were information requests about specific details of the vendor setups and food menus. I had all that in my original application minus the menus. Well, I decide to comply in kind. I submit my new application on Friday at 4 p.m. This is 30 minutes prior to the workday ending. I call DD and explain what had happened and to ask him if he can make sure I have the approval by Tuesday morning. He answers the phone, we greet each other. Before I can even get a word in, he goes, "RL's trying to ruin your event, isn't she?" I go, "Yep." I'm tired of her crap. I'll deal with this right now. Enjoy your long weekend, and I'll see you in a few weeks. I got an email from RL at around 7 p.m. that night telling me to pick up the documents from their office on Tuesday morning. She won't be in as she's going on vacation for 2 weeks and to refer any questions to her manager. 2 weeks later, I run into DD at my festival. He pulls me aside. "I know what you did. You're a lucky one, you know. RL was flying out to Europe for 2 weeks when you called me. I caught her just as she was walking out. I made her stay late and get your approval done before she leaves. I'm pretty sure she missed her flight." And our last story. The fence is whiter on the other side. This story's something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to was a commercial apartment/condo place with an HOA. To paint the picture, this place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that lead to a parking lot, some of which my mother noticed has fences. My mother handled mostly all of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quick that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent in a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guidelines, she finds a contractor, which she discovered was an old childhood friend, surprise, and has the fence put in. Cue HOA. My mom submits the contractor's document stating the kind of fence and color and specs, only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning, the technical term for the color, white, of the fence doesn't match what they allow. Best example would be they allow paper white, but it was labeled eggshell. They stated they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get the other white, you had to use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved, to say the least. She went as far to take pictures of all the fences, hers included, and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't, but still didn't care. The paperwork didn't match. Thankfully, she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence, and the HOA watch as it's taken away in a day. The next day, the same fence comes back and gets put in again. This time, the paperwork says paper white. It's been years, and my mother still has the same fence. The HOA never said anything farther. Those fees were never paid, but it's fine. My mom doesn't use the pool anyway. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.